Hello, this is Cycle Camp, and today I'm going to be doing a partial disassembly and some cleaning on an antique milsurp firearm I just recently acquired. This is a French 1892 model pistol revolver. Uh, Basically, this was manufactured in 1912. You may be able to see that on the barrel here. I'm not sure if that's going to come out in the pictures or not because I have a relatively crappy camera setup. But in any event, I got this used from a pawn shop for a fairly reasonable price. And today I wanted to try cleaning it up a little bit. One of the things I want to do is take a run down the bore, obviously, and clean up inside the bore a little bit. You can probably see that there is rifling that's pretty prominent, so the rifling appears to be intact. However, it is very dirty, and I can't tell if there's any pitting in there or not. And that's one of the chances you take when you buy a used gun like this. I knew it was kind of dark when I bought it, but it's an interesting pistol, and I will be describing some of the interesting features about it. Even though this gun was manufactured in 1912, it has some features which I would consider to be fairly cool modern features. So, and one of those is what they call the rebound hammer on this. I don't know if you can see it, but yeah, I don't think I can get you to see it. But basically, in here, you can see that the hammer is not all the way. If I get something white to put in the back of that, you'll probably be able to see it. Wait a minute. If you look through there, you'll see that the hammer stands off from the frame a little bit. You know, right in here, it doesn't come all the way down. And if you could see it, oh, I guess you can see that a little bit. You can see that the firing pin, which is part of the hammer, does not come all the way into the firearm when the thing is at rest. When you cock the firearm and pull the trigger and then let it come down, you will see that the firing pin comes all the way. You can just see it there. You can see it comes all the way in to hit. But when you release the hammer, when you release the trigger, it brings the hammer back. So this is almost like a safety feature on this gun. You could carry this gun fully loaded, and the hammer, unless you pull the trigger all the way past the firing point, the hammer cannot fall on the primer. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I'd never seen that before. So it's a pretty neat little gun, and it's got some interesting mechanical characteristics, and hopefully we'll see some of that as I take it apart today and we go through it and try to clean it up a little bit. So I have some ammunition on order for it. I was able to find some new old stock Fiocchi ammunition that fits this firearm. So I'm looking forward to being able to shoot it come the springtime when things get all dried out. Our outdoor range is at the intersection of two rivers, so it's not an easy place to get into when things are pretty crummy. So let's get started and start cleaning this up a little bit. So the first thing I'm going to do, obviously, is open it up, and I'm going to take some bore cleaner, some bore scrubber, and I'm going to wet up the inside of the barrel and also run in each of the individual chambers in the cylinder to start getting those a chance to get wet and hopefully loosen up some of the crud that's in there. So I'm going to use I generally use Birchwood Casey bore scrubber for this. I find that works pretty well for that kind of stuff. I'm going to do this off camera because I'm going to spray stuff, and I'm not at my actual cleaning table because there's no place I can set up a camera there. I'm actually at my regular desk where I do my computer work and stuff. So I'm going to be turning to the side here and spraying this off where I can spray it into a trash can. So we'll wet that up a little bit best we can. Of course, most of you guys that use any aerosol propellants know that every time you want to use them, they get gummed up, and then you have to pull off the tips and then put them back in again. But in any event, that's the way it goes. So we'll ram this down here. You can see it dripping a little bit, which is great. We'll get this nice and wet. And hopefully that'll give that a chance to get soaked up a little bit. And we'll do the same in each of the pockets of the cylinder here. and let that get started. The firearm was in fairly decent shape. You know, like I said, other than a little, very little surface, it's almost a patina rather than rust, I would say. But it's in very nice shape. Another interesting thing about this firearm is that it has a regular star extractor on it, and that's pretty neat. A lot of guns of this vintage, you would have just had to use like a single action. You'd have to use a single action push rod to empty each chamber separately. Also notice, for those that are wondering if this is all filmed backwards, this firearm actually lifts its cylinder out to the right as opposed to the left. And my understanding from the reading that I've done is that's because this was a cavalry gun. You can see it's got the little ring for being put on a lanyard and stuff. And basically, the French cavalry officer was expected to hold this gun in his left hand and his sword in his right, and he was supposed to do his loading and unloading with his dominant hand. But then when he was in battle, he was to have this weapon in his left hand and his saber in his right. So how true that is, I don't know, but that is stuff that I have read. So we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna let that soak a little bit and see how that goes. In the meantime, we're gonna start dismembering the main part of the firearm. These are very interesting firearms in the way they disassemble. Basically, there's the equivalent of like a clamshell here, and this whole thing lifts off and exposes the mechanism of the gun, and you get at that through this one screw that's right here in the back. That's the main disassembly screw. So we're going to get our hollow ground tools here and open that up. This screw is a captive screw, which means it doesn't come all the way out. So you basically open it up until it snaps a couple times, and then you can see there's now a little space here between the two, and you can grab this. Oh, wait a minute, I don't think I did this far enough. Let me open this up some more. There we go. Yeah. And now you can lift. Oh boy, this is stiff. It probably hasn't been opened in 60 years. But basically that opens up the action of the firearm, and now one side of the pistol grip, at least that's the theory, you should be able to lift this up and out. It captures down in here. There's a little space where it captures down here inside the butt, the bottom of the butt, and you lift off your pistol grip, set it to the side, and this is what's left of the firearm. So you've got most of the stuff you need to do to see what's going on with the firearm. You've got your mainspring. There's a small keeper down here against the that's on the frame of the gun itself. To keep that spring from flopping around, keeps it from coming forward. But that's basically how you open that up. You've got the trigger mechanism. Here's the hand for the. This is the hand for to move the revolver and all that stuff. That's all pretty straightforward. And you can see how the action of the gun works. You open it up, and now it's ready to go. The trigger operates the sear, which you can't really quite see. It's obviously part of the trigger down in here. But as we take that apart, we'll get it back. And this actually is not in as bad a shape as I thought it was going to be. It does have some light corrosion on it, but it's not really in too bad a shape. I'm pretty impressed at how this looks. But that's basically how that stuff is all put together. And if you want to take off the other part of the pistol grip, you'll notice this blind nut here that's kind of built into it. And in order to get that out, you have to remove this mainspring, and then there is a screw underneath here where you can there's a screw underneath here where you can pop that screw out, and the other side of the pistol grip will come out. So I will probably do that as well, and we'll see what happens. So that's basically exposes most of the mechanics of the firearm. It's a very simple firearm. There's not a hell of a lot of parts to it. It's pretty easy to take apart. Another thing that's very interesting, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see it or not, but there are actually numbers printed on here that show the order to disassemble things. So like there's a little, I think that's a 2. So there's a little 2 on the hammer, and there's a small 3 that's 4. I'm sorry. There's a small 4 that's printed on the trigger, and basically it tells you the order. There's a 1 right here at the end of the spring. So this actually gives you the order that you take this out first, and then I'm sure that uncovers something else that has a number. I'm sorry. Then you would take out the trigger assembly. And I expect when you get both of those out, then there's something else in here that's marked with a 3, which is not entirely obvious right now. And then you take out the 4. So basically, the gun is actually built with stamped numbers to show you how to take it apart, which I thought was pretty cool. So your average bear could get one of these things apart. Now I've never taken one of these apart before, so I'm sure I'm going to mess this up a few times here and there, but I guess we'll see. So my understanding is the way you take one of these apart is you pull this spring slightly away and then lift it up over the retainer and let it come free. And you'll notice that there's actually a wheel on this spring, so that when you cock it, when it's moving and going back and forth, it actually rolls instead of dragging, which again I thought was a pretty neat modern thing to do. So that's basically there's the 3. The 3, you can't see it, I'm sure, but I can see it. There's actually a 3 here to take off the second half of the grip. So that's 1, and now we've got the spring out of this thing. And then next would be, if I understand this correctly, would be number 2 would be this trigger. So we can gently remove the trigger and set that to the side. 3, I think, I don't see that well, so let me just take a quick look. I don't think I have a magnifying glass handy. I do have one in my tool case, but I'm pretty sure this is a 3. So, sorry, a 4. So I'm pretty sure the 3 is in there. So let's grab a slightly smaller screwdriver. Of course, like they tell you, always use the largest screwdriver that'll fit if you want to avoid marring or damaging your parts. That one, unfortunately, is the right width, but it's too thick, so we'll have to go down 1. There we go. So we can now take out the screw that holds in the other half of the pistol grip. There's the other half of the pistol grip. You see it also slides in underneath this little part on the butt. I am not going to disassemble the lanyard assembly. You can do that, but I'm not going to do that unless it's absolutely necessary. So that's fine. And then next is number 4, which is our friend the trigger. So we'll take the trigger out. And there's the trigger is gone. And that's almost all the actual action pieces of the gun. There is one small, this is a spring that operates or pushes against the latch, right, that keeps what do you call it, from coming out, the cylinder latch. So I don't think I'm going to be taking that out. I think I can reach most of what I want to reach in here to do this. And I don't think I'm going to take apart the front end of the gun. You can remove some of these screws and actually get to the point where you can remove this crane and the cylinder and take the spring out. But I don't think I'm going to do that during this exercise here. I just wanted to give an example of how simple it is to get this gun 90% of the way open. But I have seen this on other videos, so I'm sure there's plenty of other videos you can watch that show this kind of thing. And actually, that ring comes right out of there with no problem at all. So I guess I will take it out since it's so easy to take out, and the little keeper that holds it. So don't know if you saw that, but basically the ring has a notch cut in it, and it comes in underneath and goes into this hole, and then this slides over to capture it. That's basically how that came out. So that was pretty straightforward. So as you can see, in addition to being an interesting gun and a very old gun, it is mechanically a fairly interesting gun and quite simple when you get right down to it. There's not a lot to it. Though I will say that the springs on these guns, you would never want to have to try to replace one of these because they are incredibly detailed, and they have a lot of work on them. I mean, look at the little tang on that matches, you know, that keeps that centered on this pistol grip, and you know, the small part. And I mean, there's a lot of manufacturing that went into building this. God forbid you break or bust one of these springs. I think you'd have a real tough time replicating it. I'm not sure how hard it is to find parts for these. I don't think these guns are that prevalent, but it is kind of hard to do that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start actually cleaning this up. Basically, I'm going to be using Ballistol, which is a multi-purpose combination lubricant and protectant, and I'm going to be using 40 steel wool, the ultrafine steel wool, and I'm just going to lightly go over some of these areas and see if I can bring them back to life and get rid of some of the very light rust and the some of the surface pitting that's out there. But I'm sure you're not going to want to be bored to death watching me do that. So I'm going to stop this video here, and I'm going to start actually working on steel wooling down this firearm and seeing if we can get it much cleaner. And then when I'm done, I'll bring it back and we'll see how good or bad a job I've done. So I will see you back in a few minutes, or however long it takes. I'm not really sure how long it's going to take. Okay, so I've gone about as far as I'm going to go. This was about a half hour's worth of cleaning, so not an excessive amount. Again, this is a very old gun, and I don't want to screw it up by over cleaning it and ruin the patina and all that. To be honest with you, I was fairly happy with the way this has come out. The internal components cleaned up beautifully. And there is only very light pitting on this firearm here, like right on this edge. This whole section here cleaned up beautifully. Very light pitting on this edge, and of course that's from, you know, the stuff it's working its way in between the grips. On the opposite side, not as good. It pitted a little further out, but again, pitted, not rusted. So I was pretty happy with this. I did uncover some scratches that were here around where the manufacturer's name is. There were some scratches on here, so I'm just going to have to learn to live with that. But most of the action parts, as you can see, this spring cleaned up great. The gate for the what do you call it, for the cylinder cleaned up very well. You know, all cleaned up very nicely. Very, very happy with this. All over this firearm, it cleaned up very well, and the main firearm itself cleaned up pretty well. The cylinders in the ports for the bullets in the cylinders came out really nice. You know, no real issue with those. The main barrel here cleaned up pretty well. I'm not as happy with that as I am with the rest of the firearm. You can definitely see the lands very well. There is still some dark discoloration in there. I can't tell if it's pitting or if I just need to clean it up a little harder. I really didn't want to go crazy with this with the brass brush. I'm thinking after I fire a few rounds out of it and then clean it again, some of that may come clean. So I'm not going to go too crazy with it. So what I'm going to try to do now is put this thing back together. So that ought to be a lot of fun, because I'm not real good at remembering how I take things apart, which is why I usually use what do you call it, other people's videos to put stuff apart and take it together, take it apart and put it together. So let me so first I'm going to put the part that holds the lanyard swivel in there, and that also has the two pieces. I don't know if I noticed it before, but if you look at the way this is made, these two ears, this is where the two sides of the grips go inside and gets captured. So that's what that's for. So let's we'll throw that in first. Let's see if I can do this without making a mess. All of you environmentally correct young people that do this, that are probably all saying, "Oh my God, look at his hands, they're filthy, and he wasn't wearing gloves," and it says, "Yeah, that's right, I'm old, I don't care." So we'll see what happens. So this obviously should just pop right in, so of course it won't. Especially since I'm talking to you folks about it at the same time. There we go. So I get that up. There we go. So now that's in. So now we have the ring put back on. And then we're going to need to drop the trigger in. The trigger in the hand. So we know the trigger goes on the swivel. And the hand is going to drop down. After we get the trigger in, the hand is going to go back up into that area. So we'll leave that right where it is. And then next thing, you can see these cleaned up very well. I got a little bit of tarnish there I couldn't quite get off, but I didn't want to do too much more. You can see that little black spot there. But generally speaking, the internal components of this cleaned up very well. I'm really happy with it. So now we'll drop the trigger in here. See if we can get it in without making a mess. This whole firearm. There we go. And that looks like it went in where it was supposed to. I'm not really sure, but we'll see. Okay. Okay, and then last is this little spring. And I believe that went inside the hand. And then you loop it up in here, and you're going to bring it back, push it forward and drop it in, but I didn't quite get it in all the way, so let's try it again. So I'm missing something here, but I'm not sure what. So let me got to get this up further in order to get it into the yeah, that looks right. Get it in there. This is going to have to be way up there. There we go. That was a little bit easier. So instead of trying to put the roller in and bend it in, I just put the roller up loose and then dropped it in, and that seemed to do it. So let's see if it still operates. So we're going to pull this back. Pull it, let it come forward, pull it back, let it come forward. It does, when I pull it all the way forward, the hammer does go all the way, the hammer does go all the way into the fire position here. When I let it go, it rebounds the hammer, so that looks good. So that all looked pretty good. Oh, I know what I forgot. Jeez, idiot me. Alright, let's try it again. I forgot to put the part for the second grip because of how that comes out of there. So let's do that next. So this outside grip on this side, it's going to go this way. Okay, so we're going to set it down inside that little capture and then turn it over and put this back in there. And I'll find my screwdriver, which I threw on the other side of the office here. Okay. Zip, 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 zip. I'm always pretty careful I don't snug these up too much because these are pretty old and you don't want to crack them. God forbid you'll never replace them. So that took care of that. Now we can try to put this spring back in and drop this in. That didn't work. Try again. Play around a little bit and see which trick I used to get that in there the last time. Okay, so this time I'm going to set this catch the hand, then I'm going to drop this in and squeeze it and stick it down. There we go. Okay, so let's try it again. So, and cocked and fired, cocked and fired, cocked and fired. Okay. Alright, so that looks good. Okay, so now we should be able to put the other pistol grip on, set it down in carefully. Now we're going to swing the big plate over. And I'm going to change tips on my screwdriver to go to my big screwdriver tip so I don't gnarl up the, don't bugger up the screw. And there we are. And that's all put together. So it's all put together. It's been cleaned up and oiled, you know, lubricated and all that. Like I said, it still has some scratches down here on the finish. But other than that, for a gun that's what did we say this was? 1912. So 1912, 2017, yeah, 115 years old. I'm sorry, 105 years old, not 115. That'd be 2027. But a 105-year-old gun, you know, it cleaned up pretty well. I'm very pleased with it. So I hope you enjoyed watching the take apart. There are other videos out there on the internet where they take apart these forward sections and drop the revolver out. And in fact, if I had like an ultrasonic cleaner, then I would have totally stripped the gun down and put all the small parts in an ultrasonic cleaner. I think that would have cleaned it up better than what I've done here. But, you know, for just your average Joe guy that doesn't, you know, not a gunsmith and just likes taking stuff apart and putting it back together, this was good enough for me. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, and have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.